So this week we're going to do something a little bit different, something kind of fun. I think we've been doing a lot of these hard labs every week, so I figured I'd switch it up a little bit this week. So what we're going to do is in your Google account, the first thing you're going to need to do is build a new machine for this week from a snapshot. So I'll show you how I'm going to do this. So I'm going to go into my compute engine and take a look at my VM instances, and you'll see I've got a few of them in here. Here's the original one that I created in the first week of class, and then I have a snapshot from week 4. So I'm going to take a snapshot of week 4 so I can build a week 5 machine that I'm going to start with. And it's very important that you do this because there's an important step here that the rest of the lab will not work if you don't do this. So my first step to create that snapshot, again, many of you have done this before, but you're going to go into compute engine and then snapshots. And then we're going to create a new snapshot. So I'm going to click create snapshot. I'm going to call this one CIS-285 week 4 because it's my week 4 snapshot, and my source disk is going to be week 4, and that's it. So I'm going to create that snapshot. I'm going to let that run for a little bit. So that's going to kind of spin around for a little while it's creating the snapshot, and once that's done, we're going to use that snapshot to build a new machine. So let's just wait for that to finish. Okay, my snapshot is done. So the next step is I'm going to build a VM instance, and pay close attention here because there's a step here that we haven't done in the in previous lessons. So we're going to create a new instance. I'm going to hit the button here to create a new instance. All right, I'm going to give my instance a name. I'm just going to call it CIS-285 week 5. Nice obvious name, right? As always, I'm going to make sure I go in here. I'm going to choose a the micro, right? So I have to change the series to N1, and then come back down here and choose micro. That way it's the smallest possible machine you can get. For my disk, I'm going to change this to my snapshot so it's ready to go, right? So the snapshot was week 4, which is good. All right, and then finally I have to go down here to management and security, and I want to make sure let's see, where is it? So right here under the under where we set the disk, there's an option for identity and API access. We're going to go to set access for each API, and you're going to scroll down, and we're going to make sure we turn on storage. So we're going to set storage to full access to storage. The rest you can leave as the default, but we need full access to storage for this to work. So once I fill all that out, I'm going to click create, and it's going to create my VM. So we'll give it a minute here and wait for it to finish creating the virtual machine. All right, so the machine has been created, as you can see. So now I should be able to connect to it. Here's my public IP address. So I'm going to copy that to my clipboard, and I'll open PowerShell so I can SSH to my machine. All right, so I'm going to use SSH to connect. First thing I'm going to do when I'm connected is, as I usually do in this class, I just use the su command to make sure that I'm running as root. Right, so at the pound sign, I know I'm running as root now. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the console in cloud. Now that we're logged in and we know that's working, let's go back to our cloud console, and we're going to do something a little different here. We're going to go into storage. Oops. And but not this storage, right? We need to go to a different storage. So on the left-hand side, go in the hamburger, and I'm going to scroll down, and somewhere in under storage, right? So this is different than your VM storage. We're going to go into storage, go to browser, and we're going to create a storage bucket in Google Cloud. Storage buckets are basically it's a web service you can access to store data in Google Cloud. You can use APIs to store to it. You can just upload data from a browser. You can connect from machines and so forth. So I'm going to create a bucket of storage. And I'm going to call mine, let's see, name my bucket. I'm going to name it CIS-285 week 5. I'm going to close the cost estimate because I don't need that. All right, so I'm just going to keep it on multi-region. Doesn't really matter. Standard is fine. It's cheaper if you use these other options like nearline, cold line, archive, right? It gets cheaper and cheaper the further down you go. But we're only going to store a couple very small files, right? We're going to use uniform permissions instead of fine-grained. And for encryption, I'm just going to use Google Managed Key. That's fine. And then I'm going to hit Create. And it's going to create a bucket for me. All right, so now I've got this bucket, right? So when I go back, I'm going to have a list of buckets. There's my CIS85 week 5 bucket. And when I go in here, right, I've got a bucket. I am going to create a folder, and I'll call it Brian. So now I've got a folder called Brian, and inside that folder, I'm going to upload a file. I gotta wait for the upload dialog to come up. So I have a file here called song.txt, so I'm going to select that and upload it. So it's going to upload that file into my Google bucket. I'll give it a second here. And you can see that file is now uploaded, right? It failed the first time, but it did upload. So now let's go back to our virtual machine, and what we're going to do is we're going to mount this bucket as a drive, just like we saw in the lecture. We can mount things to a folder. We're going to mount a folder from a storage bucket in Google Cloud. So we talked about different file systems, and it turns out one of the file systems you can use in Linux is Fuse. So Fuse is a file system for mounting Google buckets in the cloud. There's other ones for Amazon S3 and for Azure Blob Storage and so forth that work in Linux. But since we're using Google, we're going to try this with Google. In order for this to work, though, you do have to install a package. So I'm going to give you the instructions the instructions for the lab on how to do this. But you're going to copy and paste basically this. So what this file does is it's going to create a repo file on and basically tell Yum where to go to download the Fuse package, right? So once that's installed, now we should be able to run the Yum command just like we normally would. So Yum install Google Cloud Storage Fuse. Let's see if it finds it. All right, there's a whole bunch of stuff here that it's going to find. Oh, it says it's already installed. I probably installed this earlier when I was testing this. So my next step is let me create a folder. So I'm going to create a folder using the mkdir command, and I'm going to call it bucket. So now I have a directory called bucket. So the next step is I want to use the mount command to mount this bucket, right? Actually, we have to use the gfuse command, the gcs-fuse command. So gcs-fuse, and we are going to, first we have to tell it what the bucket name is. So my bucket was called CIS285-week5, and I'm going to mount that to, let's see, I called it bucket. There we go, it's been mounted. So now if I change directory into /bucket, through the ls command, there's that Brian folder that I created. And if I look in Brian, there's song.txt. And I can look at the contents of that song, right? There it is. So pretty straightforward, right? So we were able to mount and access a bucket. We can we can also upload a file, right? So for example, I could, I don't know, let's just touch a file, touch test file. And that creates a test file. And if I go back to my Google Cloud and I refresh this Brian directory, I should see another file in here. There it is. There's my test file, right? It has 0 bytes because I haven't done anything with it yet, right? All right, so that's how we mount a directory with Fuse. That's actually a storage bucket in Google. Obviously not a typical usage for that command or for mounting, right? Usually we're mounting local file systems, but again, I just wanted to try something a little different this week, kind of slow things down a little bit this week and just try something a little more fun. So you can certainly play around with that. And you can see that, you know, what you could do here is you could set up a storage bucket in Google. And by the way, storage buckets are a lot less expensive than storage for your VM. So you can spin up a VM and then connect it to a bucket that has much cheaper storage, and you can store stuff using SFTP through your VM, right? There's other ways to do it too, right? We could set up a Kubernetes instance or something and do some interesting stuff, but that's a lot of scope for this class. But again, I just wanted to show you what that looks like. In the lecture this week, we talked about encrypting files. We're going to talk more in depth about encryption later in the course when we talk about network security. So we'll cover more encryption in more detail, I think, in that unit. But for now, just to kind of try encryption, again, this week, we're going to take it nice and light and easy. We're going to use the gbg command to do that. So if you look in my folder, by the way, I'm still in my Google bucket, right? So in my Google bucket, I'm going to create a file that is encrypted, and then I'm going to decrypt that file. So I already uploaded that file called song.txt, right? If we look at the contents of it, it is in plain text, right? So to encrypt it, I'd use the gbg command -c to encrypt it with a passphrase, and then I give it the file name, which is song.txt. It's going to ask me for a passphrase. I'm just going to make it something simple. That's it. So now I've got the encrypted version of that file, which has the .gpg extension on it. So now if I open up my bucket, I'm going to go back over here. So if I go into my storage bucket, let's go back here. So I've got two song.txt's. I know that it's not this one that says it's plain text. I know it's this other one below it, right? Because I just uploaded it. So I'm going to download this one. So I'm going to click download it. It's going to save it to my hard drive, and I'm going to open that with Notepad just so you can see what it looks like. So there's that file in Notepad, and you can see it's just a bunch of gibberish, right? It's just random characters. It just so happens that when it tries to decode these with ASCII, it looks like some kind of Asian language. I'm not sure which one, right? So we have to decrypt that file, right? That I encrypted. So what I did is I downloaded. Let me just close these other windows. So I downloaded a free utility, right? gbg for Windows, and I'll put the URL in the assignment instructions. And so that's installed on my Windows machine. So since I downloaded that file, I can just come in here. It's gbg-d to decrypt. And actually, well, we already know that file is encrypted, right? So -d is to decrypt, and then the name of the file, which is song.txt.gpg. Oh, it says that file does not exist. So let me make sure I got the right. Oh, that's right. It attached the folder name to the front like that. All right, so you can't see it, so I'll drag it over, but it's asking me for the password for the file, which I'll type in, and there it is, right? So now I have the file, right? It decrypted it, and that's it. So we were able to encrypt the file on the bucket, right, natively, and then I just downloaded it from the bucket, so I didn't have to deal with SFTP. Kind of useful to have a bucket attached for moving files. You might want to, for the remainder of these labs, to leave that bucket in place so it's easy to move files on your machine without using SFTP if you don't want. Maybe it's a little bit easier than using, WinSCP or something like that. By the way, to make this a permanent, to mount it permanently, let me go back through my commands here, is df-h. That'll make sure that it's mounted every time you log in, right? So it's automatically mounted, so you don't have to keep mounting it every time you connect to your machine. And that's it. So nice, easy week.